Now we can pause. Wonderful. All right, guys, we are back. And it's good to follow along. You know, write the code that I write. Not always required. Sometimes, you know, it's just good to watch. But if you can do both, that's fine. Just a couple notes for, you know, it's certainly easier to do both if you're in this row versus that row. Because that row, you're looking over your shoulder the entire time. So maybe adjusting where you sit is totally fine if you can. It's up to you. Let me just demonstrate how to, like, let's close a solution. File, close a solution. Remember, projects, multiple projects in the solution. File, close solution. It goes away, and notice we can open up the solution. So now I've got a recent chapter 2 solution, and it reopens it up. Right? So if I just close Visual Studio and I open up Visual Studio, it brings me to this screen. I can open up chapter 2 solution. Okay. I'll walk through these steps again. So, like, let's just say I'm ready to move on to chapter 3. Again, you don't need to do this now. You can just watch. I'm going to close solution. Where do we start? Create a new project. You don't need to do this now. You could just watch. Create a new project. Now I've got recent templates. These are the 2 templates we're using all semester. Now I've got a recent template. So let's just say it's a council app. Now it's updated my location to be the lab folder. That's exactly what I want. Sometimes I need to change it to like the hands-on test folder. But for now, it's the lab folder. Now remember my solution name. We named it CHO2 because that's the subfolder. But now we're in chapter 3, so I'm going to name it CHO3. That's going to put it in that folder. My solution will be in the chapter 3 folder. So I named the solution the same as the folder. It's going to put it in there. If you don't name it the same, what does it do? Creates a new. Correct. Creates a new. My project name, we'll just call this Lab 1. This is chapter 3, Lab 1. Next. .NET 6 is fine. There we go. Console.WriteLine, hello world. Control F5 to run it. I got hello world and hello world 2. Okay. Now I'm in chapter 3. Let's go ahead and do file, close solution. Now I've got chapter 3 solution, chapter 2 solution. Chapter 2 solution has 2 labs. Let's close that. Chapter 3 solution has 1 lab. 1 project, I should say. How do I add a project to a solution? You right-click the solution, add project, add new project. We'll make another council app. This will be called Lab 2. Now we've got Lab 1, Lab 2. Lab 1 is set to the startup project. We change that right here. Lab 2 is the startup project. It goes bold. The code for it's right here, program.cs. We'll call hello Lab 2. Control F5 to run it. Now it says hello Lab 2. Change it to Lab 1, Control F5. It runs that one. So this is just navigating the tool. This is just navigating the tool. I've covered a lot of this information, right? As in any piece of software, you've got a lot of software settings, whether that's Discord or whether that's Visual Studio. So this is the options dialog box. Let's look for where the options dialog box is. If I go to tools, options, these are our settings. Let's look here. Hey, it's 2022. Everyone wants a dark mode, right? Let's go ahead and change that to a dark mode. It's up to you. Can you guys see that any better or worse?
Probably for you, keep it light mode.
For me, I'm going to keep it light mode. For you guys. So let's how do we do that? Tools, options. We just called that blue extra contrast. How about that? We'll keep it light mode for you guys, but feel free to change yours. Let's look what else is under options. A lot of the things that I would always change are already on here. Like there's line numbers. We already got line numbers. That's important. If I go to locations, it kind of updated that. So I go ahead and tools, options. Under projects and solutions, we've got locations. My project location. Well, that's the default. You could always change it, but this is just where it suggests it. Right? Well, where do I want it to suggest it? Well, I want to suggest it to documents, GitHub, all repos, that's me, lab. I'm not going to change the template location, but the project location, I will. So now when I say file, close solution, and I say create a new project, I'm not going to actually do this. This location, this is where this location should be. That's that setting. That's where this defaults to. Doesn't really matter because you could always change it, right? You could always change it. And it even remembers the history of where you've been. You could always change it with this ellipsis button. But that's what that setting is. And again, all your settings are under here. Let's go ahead and do file, open, solution. So this is, notice what happened here. When you first open, it kind of gives you this welcome screen. If you, like, let's say you open this, and then you close this solution, file, close solution, brings back the welcome screen. Sometimes it doesn't bring back the welcome screen. Like I just closed the welcome screen. So now what do I want to do? I want to open that solution, but I don't have the welcome screen. Right? You can still open a solution. File, open, solution. It's project or solution. Right? And then you just navigate to the SLN file. The SLN file is going to be in the Chapter 02 folder. So if you open up the solution this way, there you go. So if you don't have the welcome screen, you can still open a solution just by saying File, Open Solution. We've been through Create New Project, Configure the project, we've done that. I've shown you a label, I've shown you a text box, I've shown you a button. Now we haven't used the text box. So real quickly I can show you how to use the text box. Keep in mind we named all these controls. It's a good practice to name your controls. Don't leave them the default names. If the rule of thumb that I use is that if you're going to be changing properties of a control through code, then you need to have it a good name. It needs to have a good name. And so you notice here, when I reference the label in the code, I don't want this code to say label1.txt. Okay, so if you're referencing a control through the code, through C#, it should have a good name. So this text box I call txt username. Well, check this out. Instead of label display.text, it'll say hello world. Now I'm going to set the text property of the label equal to the text property of the text box. See that? And maybe what I'll do is I'll say hello plus the username. So it'll say hello Billy. We're doing this on a button click. Control F5. Sam. Click on submit. Now it says hello Sam. What we did there makes sense if you just think about it. The plus is an addition, so we're adding the word hello that's in quotes. We're adding the word hello to whatever the user types in the text box. That's given a fun word. My returning students know that word is called concatenation. Right? Which really means you're adding what are called strings together. We're adding strings. This text box is a string, what the user types, and the word hello is a string. It's just a combination of characters at the keyboard. That's called a string. So now I've demonstrated using buttons, I've demonstrated using text boxes and labels all in one little click event. Yes.
So when I was doing the hello plus txt username text.
Yep.
Do I have to put a space between the?
Yeah. What happens if you don't put a space here?
It didn't space it.
It didn't space it.
Okay.
So to get it to output the way you want, yeah, there's some trickery there.
Yeah.
Right? It'll put hello Sam together, but if I put a space right here like I did there, then okay. Now let's click on the form. Notice I'm on the form now. Properties of the form. There's some properties of the form that I want to point out. Notice the accept button. You can click on the property. The accept button of the form. If this is set, the button is clicked whenever the user presses enter. So like if you got a bunch of buttons and you want one of them to kind of be the default button for the form, you set that to the accept button of the form property. The property accept button of the form. So notice here, the accept button gives you a little drop-down list, and I could say button submit. So now when I run the form and I just hit the enter key, it runs the event.
Because that's the only button, that's why it showed you button submit, right?
That's the only button, that's the only one that showed me there. So since there's no text name, you know, if I put in Sam, now I hit enter, it says hello Sam. So that's another property. Again, if I change this to be my form, and I scroll down here to these accept button, the cancel button is what happens if the user presses the escape key. And so you might do like, I don't know, maybe the escape key closes it or something. You could do a close of the form, like clicking the X.
That's cool.
So that's the accept button and the cancel button. Again, dragging in, dropping controls, and you can make little, you know, little tools. It's really not super hard to get started with this once you just get used to the tool, Visual Studio, and you get used to, you know, I will tell you, you can do a lot with a little here. I had a student years ago who worked at a a retail place in the mall where he would take measurements for people who were getting suits for like weddings and that kind of stuff. And they did everything on pen and paper. And it was just really inefficient because they would lose the papers. There was like not a good filing system. And he was able to take, like, just within the first month of this class, he was able to make a software where you could input the numbers, you know, click a button, get totals, and it would like save records to a database. Instead of saving it to a piece of paper, now you're saving it to a computer file so that you could search for users later on and find out what they paid. It was a much more efficient system. And that's really not, I mean, you can kind of look here, that's kind of what this screenshot looks like. You know, just making totals, and based on some inputs, you do some math and you give the user a total and that kind of thing. Right? They go through different ways to add controls to the form. Like I said, there's 10 ways to do one thing here. Drag and drop, double clicking, and all that. This kind of stuff, as far as like, once you drag it, you know, you can kind of come in here, you can make the text box as large as you want. There's a bunch of alignment tools that you can kind of see as you're dragging things. You get these little alignment tools. You can change the properties, like down here. Like here's the size of the box, so if you don't want to drag and drop it, you could set the width down here, and then maybe changing the height. I guess a text box is not going to let you change the height. That's interesting. Why does it pretend like it's going to let you change the height, but if it doesn't? Text boxes, you typically don't change the height like that anyways. But you get the idea. There's multiple ways of doing things. You can, this is just learning here. Like let's say you like this text box, you set it up once, you can Control C, Control V. You can copy and paste controls. You can highlight them all together. Now notice there's 3 controls highlighted. I can move them in a group. You can resize them in a group. You can align them as a group. You can align their lefts. You can align their centers. So there's like, let's just pretend here, here, and here. Now notice when I control click, one of them is the white. The white box is kind of like your primary control. So if I go over here and I align centers, it's going to align it based on the primary. See that? So I'm holding down control and I'm selecting multiple controls. One of them is considered the primary. And you can use these kind of alignments here. There's also under Format Align, the same controls here. Okay? This is not super important, but it's just little tricks of the trade. And because that's what this chapter is on, you know, these are the types of test questions that you get. But it's an open book test, so just look it up. It's in the book. It's helpful. It's helpful to navigate and get around for sure. Yep.
So then Visual Studio is like how it has like just like the drag and drop stuff.
Uh-huh.
So if you were just like normally code C#, you'd have to like code this all out.
Good question. Great question. Since this is drag and drop, the answer is yes. You're absolutely correct. This tool, Visual Studio, allows you to drag and drop, but this tool wasn't always available. And so in the early days of code, you didn't have drag and drop capabilities. You had to code all of this. And so what's actually happening behind the scenes here, and this is not something you need to mess with. Let's go here. Let's go to view code. If I hold down control, notice this little thing becomes clickable. And let's go to, now I click on this, let's see. Let me see how to open up the code. Basically, a lot of code was created for you, and that's what I'm trying to show you. See, here's some code that was written for you. There it is. All of this stuff, this is for the button submit. This is the button submit location, the text, the tab index. There's a lot of auto-generated code that is created for you when you drag and drop. Generally speaking, especially as beginners, we don't touch this. The more intermediate to advanced levels you get, you touch this more. Okay, so this is in the formdesigner.cx. I'm going to close that. And so this is the file that I was in. So here's my form designer, but underneath this, here's form 1 designer CS. And then I expanded like initialize component. And once you expand that, you see all this auto-generated code. Okay, so good question. Did I answer your question? Yeah. Normally, all we got to do is worry about this designer and the .cs. By the way, this form by default is called form 1, FRM1. Maybe I don't want this to be called form 1. I go to the properties of my form. I already changed the name, but you could also right-click form1.cs, rename this here. I'll call this form hello world. And so you can change the name of the file as well. This actually just changed the name of the file. So changing the name of the form is one thing through properties, but then renaming the file name is something else. Okay, so that's some of the alignment controls, sizing handles, set all the properties of the form. We covered the name property. So you kind of see the name property works. You know, that's the name of the control in your what's called source code. So when you change, for example, this control, this text box, it has a default name, text, well that's text box 1, right? If this is text username, maybe this is text password, txt password. So by changing the name property in the GUI, you're changing the name of that text box in the source code. So now I can reference that txt password by that name, txt password. You know, for example, I might say string username equals text username.text. Now you might say, what's string username? My first semester students go, I think I know what that means. Or my second semester students understand. My first semester students are going, wait a minute, I've probably never seen what that is. Okay, this is called a variable. And a variable holds a piece of information. And so we've created this variable. The variable is called username. And we're setting that piece of information to whatever the user types into the text box.
It's like a let or a const.
It's not let or const in C#, but it's the equivalent, and we'll talk about the differences. Okay, we're not going to go there today. Don't worry about that today. We'll get there. For now, what did we do? We said label display.text equals text username.text, and I think I added a word hello in quotes. Hello plus.